The sky wasn't supposed to look like that. From the observation deck of the orbital station hovering just above Earth's atmosphere, the view used to be peaceful. Blue oceans, swirling white clouds, the gentle curve of the planet glowing under sunlight. But now the stars were blocked by something else. Something massive. Something wrong. Out past the orbit of Mars, a fleet had appeared. Not human, not anything from Earth's records or dreams. It was a swarm of jagged obsidian ships, sharp like broken teeth, moving in perfect eerie unison. They didn't broadcast music or greetings. They didn't ask questions. They just arrived. And then they spoke. Their message came through every channel. Military, civilian, emergency bands, even the old radio telescopes picked it up. A deep, guttural voice layered with clicks and hisses echoed across the planet. "We are the Cathar. You are weak. You will surrender. We have 1,000,000 soldiers. Resistance is extinction. 1,000,000 soldiers." The words hit like a hammer. Governments scrambled. News anchors stammered. People hugged their children tighter. In bunkers and boardrooms, the same question echoed. What do we do? But aboard the UED's Odyssey, floating silently near the edge of the asteroid belt, one man didn't panic. He'd seen war before. Not this kind, not against aliens, but war all the same. He remembered cities reduced to rubble, supply lines cut, friends lost in the dust. He knew what it felt like to be outnumbered, outgunned, and still have to make a decision. So when the Cathar general, some towering reptilian figure shown in grainy, intercepted footage, boasted about his 1,000,000 warriors, the man didn't flinch. He just leaned forward in his command chair, eyes fixed on the main screen showing the alien armada, and said 2 words into the open channel. Good. A pause. Then calm as morning coffee. I have 1,000,000 targets. The bridge went quiet. Not because it was dramatic, though it was, but because everyone there understood what he meant. This wasn't bravado. It wasn't a movie line. It was a statement of fact. If the enemy gave you 1,000,000 things to shoot at, you didn't complain. You aimed. Back on Earth, people heard the transmission. Some thought it was madness. Others felt something stir in their chests, something stubborn, something old. Like the feeling your grandparents had when the bombs fell, but they still planted seeds in the backyard. The Cathar didn't understand. Their reply was a burst of static laughter, harsh, mechanical, almost mocking. To them, humans were soft, fragile, emotional. They bred slowly, argued among themselves, wasted time on art and music and pointless debates. How could such creatures stand against a perfectly ordered legion of bioengineered warriors, each one bred for combat since birth, linked by hive thought, fearless and tireless? They didn't know that humans had spent centuries fighting each other and surviving. That every war, every disaster, every plague had carved something into the species, a refusal to go quietly. While the Cathar gathered their forces near Jupiter, preparing for a final push toward Earth, the human fleet didn't charge. They vanished, not in a flash of light or a dramatic explosion, but quietly. Ships powered down non-essential systems. Engines went cold. They drifted into the asteroid belt, hiding among the rocks and dust like ghosts. From the outside, it looked like retreat, like surrender. But it wasn't. The captain, just the captain to his crew because titles didn't matter when oxygen was low and hope was thinner, walked the narrow corridors of the Odyssey. He checked on engineers welding cracked panels with makeshift tools. He nodded at pilots sleeping in their chairs, helmets off, faces smudged with grease. He stopped by the medbay where a young medic was stitching a gash on a technician's arm using thread sterilized over a flame. No one spoke much. They didn't need to. Everyone knew what was coming. The Cathar, meanwhile, grew impatient. Their sensors swept the system. No major human fleet. No resistance. Just silence. To them, silence meant weakness. They assumed Earth was already broken, waiting for the final blow. So they moved. 1,000,000 soldiers. Not just infantry, though they had those armored in chitinous plates, claws sharp enough to slice through titanium, but also drop pods, assault carriers, orbital siege platforms. They came like a storm, dark and certain. But as they passed through the asteroid belt, something strange happened. A rock, just a normal-looking asteroid, detonated. Not with fire, but with kinetic force. A chunk of metal, accelerated to impossible speeds, slammed into a Cathar troop carrier. The ship crumpled like paper. Then another asteroid woke up, and another. The Cathar fleet scrambled, but the attacks weren't coming from ships. They were coming from nowhere, from debris, from shadows, from places their logic said were empty. Back on the Odyssey, the captain watched the chaos unfold on screen. No triumphant grin, no victory speech. Just a quiet exhale. Phase 1, he said. They're walking right into it. His plan wasn't about matching their numbers. It was about making their numbers work against them. 1,000,000 soldiers sounded powerful, until they were packed too close, moving too predictably, trusting too much in their own perfection. Humans, on the other hand, had learned long ago that perfection was a myth. Survival wasn't about being flawless. It was about being clever, about using what you had, even if it was just rocks, old satellites, and sheer stubbornness. As the Cathar formation tightened in confusion, trying to protect their core ships, the hidden human vessels, small, fast, barely more than armored pods, began to move. Not to attack head-on, not to fight fair, but to herd. They nudged debris, triggered old mining charges, sent false signals that made the Cathar think allies were in danger. The alien general, used to total control, started making decisions based on fear, something his species rarely felt, and that was the crack. The captain knew it wouldn't end here. This was just the beginning. The Cathar still had overwhelming force. Earth was still in danger. But for the first time, the invaders weren't the hunters, they were the hunted. And somewhere down on Earth, in a basement lit by a single bulb, a child listened to the captain's words on a crackling radio. "I have 1,000,000 targets." And for the first time in days, the child smiled, because it meant someone was still fighting, not with magic weapons or alien tech, just with grit, brains, and the simple, terrifying truth that humans don't give up, even when the odds say they should. The stars outside the Odyssey's window were still dark. But in the silence between explosions, in the hum of a ship held together by hope and duct tape, something new was growing. Not just resistance, defiance, and that, more than any weapon, scared the Cathar more than they'd ever admit. It wasn't always like this, facing down alien armadas with nothing but scrap metal and nerve. Long before the stars filled with enemy ships, humans had already been fighting their own kind of wars. Not with lasers or plasma cannons, but with rusted rifles, broken promises, and cities turned to dust. Back in the 21st century, when Earth was still just one planet and not a battleground for galactic empires, people learned hard lessons the only way humans ever do. The painful way. In crowded streets, mountain passes, and ruined neighborhoods, small groups of soldiers, often just kids with too much weight on their shoulders, faced enemies 10 times their size. They didn't have fancy armor or perfect intel. What they had was something harder to copy. The ability to think on their feet, to turn a sewer pipe into a weapon, a grocery store into a fortress, a moment of silence into a trap. That's where the real edge came from, not from technology, but from experience. The kind that doesn't show up in textbooks, but in the way someone's eyes narrow when they spot a pattern, or how they stay calm when everything's falling apart. The captain of the Odyssey knew this better than most. He'd walked through places where the air smelled like burnt plastic and regret. He'd seen how people, regular people, not heroes, would share their last bottle of water, rig a radio from spare parts, or keep singing even when the power was out and the walls were shaking. That wasn't weakness. That was something the Cathar could never understand. To the aliens, war was clean, ordered. Soldiers moved like clockwork, obeying a single mind, never questioning, never hesitating. They saw emotion as a flaw, fear, grief, love, all distractions from the mission. But humans fought because of those things. A soldier didn't just protect a line on a map. They protected the house where their little sister still slept, the school where their teacher once told them they mattered, the memory of a sunset they wanted someone else to see. That made them unpredictable, dangerous in a way that didn't show up on scanners. On the Odyssey, there were no rigid chains of command like the Cathar imagined. Sure, there was a captain, but decisions often came from the engineer who noticed a strange energy spike, or the medic who realized the enemy's biosigns slowed in cold vacuum. Everyone had a voice, not because it was fair, but because survival depended on it. During drills, the crew didn't just practice firing weapons. They practiced thinking. What if your ship loses power? What if comms go dark? What if you're alone behind enemy lines with nothing but a knife and a half-charged battery? They ran scenarios where the only way out was to do something crazy, like fake a distress signal or lure enemies into a debris field or use their own wreckage as bait. And they laughed while doing it. Not because it wasn't serious, but because laughter kept the fear from freezing them solid. One evening, during a quiet moment between alerts, a young pilot sat with an old technician near the mess hall. The pilot was nervous. This was her first real combat run. She asked, "How do you stay calm when you know you're outmatched?" The technician didn't look up from the circuit board he was fixing. "You don't," he said. "You just act like you are. And after a while, you start believing it." That was the secret. Not bravery, not strength. Just the simple act of keeping going, even when every part of you screams to stop. While the Cathar trained their soldiers to be identical, same thoughts, same reflexes, same purpose, humans celebrated differences. The pilot from the high mountains thought in angles and wind currents. The engineer from the flooded coasts saw problems in currents and pressure. The medic who grew up in a city that rebuilt itself 3 times knew how to patch wounds with whatever was nearby. Tape, thread, even honey if it came to it. Together, that patchwork of minds became something stronger than any hive. The Cathar didn't get it. To them, chaos was failure. But humans had lived in chaos for generations. They knew how to find order inside it, how to turn noise into signal, fear into focus, loss into fuel. Back on Earth, even civilians were part of the fight, not with guns, but with choices. Families turned their rooftops into signal relays. Kids coded fake data streams to confuse enemy scouts. Farmers used old irrigation drones to map asteroid movements. No one waited to be saved. They all played their part, however small. And that's what the captain meant when he said, "I have 1,000,000 targets." He wasn't just talking about enemy soldiers. He was talking about opportunities. Every Cathar warrior was a node in their perfect system, and in a perfect system, one broken link can bring the whole thing down. Humans had spent centuries breaking perfect systems. Governments, empires, machines that promised safety but delivered control. They knew how to find the cracks. Now floating in the dark between Mars and Jupiter, that knowledge was their only weapon. Their ships were older, slower, fewer, but they didn't need to win in a straight fight. They just needed to make the enemy doubt, because once doubt crept in, even for a second, the Cathar's perfect unity would start to fray. And humans, they thrived in the gaps. One night as the crew prepared for the next phase, someone played an old song over the ship's speakers. Just a simple melody on a cracked guitar, recorded decades ago in a basement somewhere, no words, just sound. And for a few minutes the tension eased. Shoulders dropped, eyes closed. That song wouldn't stop a plasma blast, but it reminded everyone why they were out here. Not for glory, not for conquest, but for the quiet mornings back home, the smell of rain on dry soil, the sound of a neighbor's laugh through an open window. The Cathar had 1,000,000 soldiers. But they didn't have a single reason to fight beyond orders. Humans had billions of reasons, and that made all the difference. As the Odyssey drifted deeper into the asteroid belt, cloaked in shadow and silence, the crew didn't talk much. They checked gear, shared rations, made small jokes about Earth food they missed, real bread, hot coffee, mangoes in summer. They weren't heroes in a story. They were tired, scared, ordinary people who refused to let the light go out. And somewhere in the void, the Cathar fleet moved closer, confident in their numbers, blind to the truth. You don't defeat humans by counting them. You defeat them by underestimating them, and that mistake, that was already made. The Cathar didn't believe in traps. Not really. In their history, war was a matter of force meeting force. Bigger armies crushed smaller ones, stronger wills bent weaker minds. Deception was inefficient. Chaos was waste. So when their scouts reported the human fleet had scattered into the asteroid belt, they assumed it was retreat. Panic. The natural response of a lesser species facing extinction. They were wrong. What looked like chaos to them was, in fact, a carefully woven net, one made not of steel, but of patience, silence, and human stubbornness. The Odyssey, and the few remaining ships weren't hiding out of fear. They were waiting, watching, learning. For days, the Cathar armada pushed deeper into the belt, their formation tight, their movements precise. A million soldiers packed into drop pods, carriers, and armored walkers, all moving in perfect sync toward Mars, the last major human stronghold. They expected resistance at the planet's orbit. What they didn't expect was the belt itself to turn against them. It started small. Cathar scout ship veered off course after picking up a false distress signal, just static shaped to sound like a damaged human vessel. When it got close, a chunk of nickel-iron asteroid, rigged with a simple magnetic accelerator, shot out like a bullet and tore through its hull. No explosion, just a clean, brutal punch of physics, then another signal, another wounded ship, another ambush. At first, the Cathar dismissed it as random debris, but when 3 more ships vanished in as many hours, their general finally ordered a full sensor sweep. Nothing unusual showed up, just rocks, dust, silence. What they couldn't see were the human crews, tucked inside hollowed-out asteroids or clinging to the dark side of tumbling boulders, their ships powered down to near-zero emissions. They moved only when necessary, using old mining tethers and silent thrusters. Every action was planned hours in advance. Every move had a purpose. The real weapon wasn't the mines or the ambushes. It was confusion. The captain had studied the Cathar long enough to know their weakness. They relied on perfect coordination. Break that and their million soldiers became a million liabilities. So he didn't attack their strongest point. He attacked their certainty. Using hacked fragments of Cathar comms picked up during earlier skirmishes, his tech team stitched together fake commands. Simple phrases repeated just enough to sound real. Fall back to Sector Gamma. Reinforce the left flank. Enemy sighted at coordinates 749. The Cathar, used to obeying without question, reacted instantly. Units peeled away from the main force. Carriers shifted position. Drop pods clustered tighter, trying to protect what they thought was a vulnerable spot, and that's when the trap snapped shut. Hidden among the asteroids were hundreds of old kinetic mines, left over from Earth's mining days. Retrofitted with timers and remote triggers, they looked like ordinary space junk. But when the Cathar fleet bunched up in response to the fake orders, the humans activated them all at once. There was no fire. No dramatic laser beams, just thousands of dense metal rods accelerated to insane speeds, screaming through the void. The first wave hit the outer ships. Hulls buckled. Atmosphere hissed into space. Then came the second wave, aimed not at ships but at the debris from the first strike. Shrapnel collided with shrapnel, creating a storm of high-velocity fragments. And in the middle of it all, a million Cathar soldiers packed shoulder to shoulder in drop pods now turning into flying tombs. Because of their hive-mind link, panic spread instantly. One soldier's fear became all of theirs. Orders clashed. Some tried to retreat, others charged forward blindly. The perfect formation shattered into chaos. From the bridge of the Odyssey, the crew watched in silence as the Cathar armada tore itself apart, not by human hands, but by its own design. Their strength had become their downfall. Too many soldiers, too close together, too trusting in their own perfection. One young pilot whispered, "It's like they handed us the knife." The captain didn't answer right away. He just stared at the screen, where flashes of light marked the deaths of thousands. There was no joy in his eyes. Only grim understanding war wasn't about glory. It was about survival, and sometimes survival meant using the enemy's pride against them. As the debris field grew, the remaining Cathar ships tried to regroup. But the humans weren't done. Small fighter craft, barely more than armored pods, darted out from hiding, not to fight but to herd. They fired decoy flares, sent more fake signals, nudged drifting wreckage into new collision paths. Every move was designed to keep the Cathar off balance. Back on Earth, people watched the battle unfold through grainy feeds. They saw the alien fleet, so vast, so terrifying, now broken, confused, bleeding into the void. And for the first time, hope flickered, not because the war was over, far from it, but because they saw something they'd almost forgotten. Humans could still outthink the impossible. In a shelter beneath the ruins of an old city, a group of kids huddled around a flickering screen. One of them turned to the others and said, "They're using the rocks, like slingshots." And in that moment, it wasn't about aliens or armies. It was about cleverness. about using what you have, however small, to fight back. That night, as the Cathar limped away from the belt, leaving behind wreckage and silence, the Odyssey didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, just tired people checking systems, patching hull breaches, sharing water from a single canteen. But something had changed. The myth of Cathar invincibility was broken. And humans, ordinary, messy, brilliant humans, had done it not with bigger guns but with better thinking. The captain finally spoke, his voice low but steady. They thought 1,000,000 soldiers made them strong, but strength isn't in numbers. It's in how you use them. And as the ship drifted deeper into the dark, cloaked once more in silence, the crew knew the real fight was just beginning. But for now, in the cold emptiness of space, Earth still had a chance, and that was enough. Victory didn't feel like victory. The Cathar fleet had pulled back, their formation broken, their confidence cracked. But Earth wasn't celebrating, not yet. The sky was still scarred with smoke from orbital strikes. Cities that once buzzed with life were now quiet, lit only by emergency flares and the soft glow of rescue drones. Millions were gone. Millions more were hungry, hurt, or just trying to remember what normal felt like. Aboard the Odyssey, the mood was heavy. The ship limped through the void, its hull patched with metal plates scavenged from dead satellites. Half the crew was running on caffeine and sheer will. Oxygen recyclers groaned like old men, and yet no one complained. They'd won a battle, but the cost sat in their chests like a stone. The captain walked the corridor slowly, not giving orders, just watching. In the med bay, a young medic, barely out of training, was stitching a deep gash on a technician's forearm. No fancy laser tools, just needle, thread, and steady hands. She hummed while she worked, a soft tune from some village far away where the nights were warm and the stars weren't filled with warships. The technician winced but didn't make a sound. When he caught the captain's eye, he gave a tired nod. No words needed. They both knew. This was how humanity healed. Not with miracles, but with small acts of care, repeated again and again. Down in the mess hall, a group of engineers shared a single can of peaches, real fruit, saved for emergencies. They passed it around like it was gold. One of them joked about how his grandmother used to say, "When the world ends, save the peaches." They laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that held back tears. That was the thing no alien could understand. Humans didn't just survive. They remembered. They carried songs, recipes, stories, tiny sparks of who they were, through the darkest times. And those sparks kept the fire alive. Back on Earth, in the ruins of what used to be a school, a group of survivors had started clearing rubble. Not because they expected help, but because doing nothing felt worse. A woman with a broken arm swept dust off a child's drawing still pinned to a cracked wall. It showed a blue planet, a yellow sun, and stick figures holding hands. Simple. Hopeful. Nearby, someone had planted seeds in a cracked pot. Tomato seeds, saved from a kitchen windowsill. No guarantee they'd grow, but they tried anyway. That was the real victory. Not the broken Cathar ships floating in the belt, but this, the refusal to let despair win. Meanwhile, far away in the Cathar command vessel, their general sat in silence. He'd reviewed the battle logs again and again. He saw the fake signals, the hidden mines, the way humans used chaos like a weapon. But what haunted him wasn't the tactics. It was the footage from Earth. He'd seen humans digging through rubble with bare hands to pull out strangers. He'd seen them sharing food they didn't have. He'd even intercepted a radio message from a child asking if the stars were safe again. To his people, emotion was weakness. But what he saw wasn't weakness. It was something else, something unbreakable. His report to the High Council didn't speak of human weapons or ships. It spoke of their spirit. And for the first time in Cathar history, a general admitted fear, not of death, but of never understanding his enemy. On the Odyssey, the captain stood alone on the observation deck, staring at Earth. It looked so small from here, fragile, but he knew better. He'd seen what that little blue dot could endure. A voice came from behind him. Quiet, respectful. "Do you think they'll come back?" He didn't turn. "Yeah, they will. Then what do? We keep going," he said. "We rebuild, we teach. We remember what we lost and why we fought to keep the rest." He thought of the medic humming in the med bay. The engineers sharing peaches. The seeds in the cracked pot. That was the answer. Not more guns, more life. Later that night, the ship received a weak signal from Earth. Not military, civilian, a community radio station, broadcasting from a basement powered by a bicycle generator. Music played, old, scratchy, beautiful. Then a voice, calm and warm, to everyone out there. We're still here. Keep your lights on. We'll find our way back to each other. The entire bridge fell silent. Someone wiped their eyes. No shame in it because that voice wasn't just sound. It was proof that humanity hadn't broken. Not really. They were bent, bruised, grieving, but still reaching out. Still caring. Still planting seeds in the dark. The Cathar thought war was about numbers. About soldiers and ships and firepower. But humans knew better. War was about what you protected, and what they protected wasn't just land or resources. It was kindness, memory, the right to wake up tomorrow and try again. As the Odyssey drifted in orbit, its lights dimmed to avoid detection, Earth below began to glow, not with fire, but with tiny points of light. Homes, hospitals, makeshift shelters. Each one a quiet act of defiance. The captain finally turned from the window. He walked back to the command deck. Not with the stride of a conqueror, but with the steady step of someone who knew the work wasn't done. He gave one order. Send a message to all surviving colonies. Tell them, we're coming home. And in that moment, the real victory began. Not in space, but on the ground. In the hands of people who chose to heal instead of hate, to build instead of burn, to hope even when hope felt foolish. Because that's what humans did. They didn't just survive the storm, they planted gardens in the rain. Peace came quietly, no grand explosions, no final battle under twin suns, just a message sent across the void in the Cathar's own clipped formal tongue. We request terms. The galaxy held its breath. For centuries, the Cathar Empire had rolled over every species in its path, absorbing, erasing, reshaping. They didn't negotiate, they dictated. But now, for the first time, they asked. Aboard the Odyssey, the crew didn't cheer. They were too tired for that, too aware of what it cost to get here. The captain read the message twice, then looked out at Earth, still scarred but healing. Lights were returning to the night side. Green shoots pushed through cracked concrete. Children played in rebuilt courtyards. Their laughter carried on winds that once carried only sirens. When the Cathar envoy arrived, a single sleek vessel, unarmed, flying a truce banner made of woven metal fibers, they expected demands, reparations, territory, weapons. Instead, the human representative, chosen not for rank but for wisdom, said only this: we don't want your tech. We don't want your worlds. We just want a seat at the table. A seat. Not dominance. Not revenge. Just a voice. The Cathar were stunned. In their history, victory meant control. But humans saw victory differently. To them, winning wasn't about taking, it was about belonging. About being seen, heard, respected. Not as a threat. Not as a resource. But as equals. The agreement was signed in silence over a simple screen link. No fanfare. Just two species, one broken, one bruised, agreeing to try something new. Coexistence. In the weeks that followed, human engineers worked alongside Cathar technicians, not as enemies, but as partners, clearing debris from orbit, repairing damaged stations, sharing data on asteroid navigation. It was awkward at first. Misunderstandings happened, but slowly trust grew, not because they liked each other, but because they'd both learned the hard way that war solves nothing it doesn't break first. Back on Earth, life didn't go back to normal, because normal was gone. But something better began to take root. Schools taught not just math and science, but also empathy, history, and the stories of other worlds. Farmers grew crops under solar shields, sharing harvests with neighbors. Artists painted murals on ruined walls, some showing battles. Yes, but more showing hands reaching across divides, stars connecting distant homes. The captain, now older, quieter, stood on the observation deck of a new ship, the Horizon, built not for war but for exploration. Its hull bore the scars of old battles, but its engines were tuned for peace. As it prepared for its first diplomatic voyage to the Galactic Council, a young officer, barely old enough to remember the war, approached him. How did we do it? The officer asked, eyes wide. How did we beat 1 million soldiers? The captain didn't smile. He didn't boast. He just looked out at the stars and said, "We didn't fight 1,000,000 soldiers. We fought one enemy who thought 1,000,000 identical minds were stronger than 1,000,000,000 different hearts." The officer frowned, trying to understand. The captain went on. "They saw soldiers. We saw people. They saw numbers. We saw neighbors. They thought strength was in never bending, but we knew real strength is in bending and not breaking." Below them, Earth turned slowly, blue and green and stubbornly alive. From this height, you couldn't see the scars, only the light. Millions of tiny points glowing in the dark. Homes, hospitals, libraries, gardens growing in old bomb craters, each one a testament to a simple truth. Humans don't win by being the strongest. They win by refusing to stop caring. At the first meeting of the new Galactic Council, Earth's delegate didn't bring weapons or threats. They brought music, recordings of choirs, street performers, lullabies sung in 100 languages. They brought seeds, wheat, rice, sunflowers, and offered them to every species present. "Plant these," they said. "And remember, even in the hardest soil, life finds a way." Some laughed. Others were confused. But a few, those who had also known loss, understood, and they accepted the seeds. Years later, on distant worlds, human flowers bloomed under alien suns. And when travelers passed by, they'd pause, touch the petals, and remember the species that fought not to conquer, but to connect. The Cathar never fully understood humans, but they stopped fearing them. Instead, they watched. They learned, and in secret, some of their young began to hum Earth songs or sketch blue planets in their journals. As for the captain, he never took command of another warship. He became a teacher, then a builder, then just an old man who liked to sit on a hill at sunset watching children chase fireflies. When asked about the war, he'd shrug and say, "We just did what anyone would do. We protected home, and maybe that was the real secret all along. Not weapons, not tactics. Just love for a place, for people, for the simple right to wake up tomorrow and try again." The galaxy was vast, full of empires and mysteries, dangers and wonders. But Earth? Earth was small, fragile, human, and that more than any fleet or weapon was what changed everything. Because in the end, the stars didn't care about numbers. They cared about light and humanity. Humanity had always been good at making light, even in the darkest night.